Joining us this morning, Titania Jordan.
Tatiana Jordan. Did I get the name right?
Titania.
Titania. Okay. All right.
It's Titania Jordan.
Welcome everyone, I'm Titania Jordan with Connect, and today I have Kevin Sandlin here with me. What's up, Kevin?
Howdy.
Super staple here in the Atlanta tech space. Tell everybody where all you reach.
Where all I reach?
Yes.
Gosh, that's a tough one. So I reach every Friday to new entrepreneurs, and we do pitch practice at ATV.
Yep.
Been doing that now 3.5 years. And who knew where that would come? I mean, I was for me. I wanted, oops, sorry.
It's fine.
I wanted help with my pitch, and 3.5 years later, we're helping new entrepreneurs all over the place. So.
And what were you pitching at the time?
I was pitching Deduct More at the time.
Okay.
That was an app that came and went. It was an app for self-employed individuals to capture receipts. So at the time, I think it was not alone in the market, but new, and now every, Expensify, QuickBooks, they've all got it. So that didn't work.
But it did, right? Because you learned from your failures, and now you have helped 3 years worth of people perfect their pitch. So
sure.
I'd say it was a success in a roundabout way.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
It was a success. Yeah, and I definitely learned from that because I had just come off selling my first startup, the one that I started in 1999. I had sold that, jumped right back in, should have waited and done a little bit more who am I, what do I do kind of thing, but I jumped right back in and did it too soon and crashed and burned.
What was that first startup you sold in 99?
That was a company called CWNP, so we're a world of acronyms, and it was all about Wi-Fi training and certification. So CWNP was Certified Wireless Network Professional, still in business today. We sold it in 2012, and they're still going strong.
What was that experience like?
It was the kind of the defining experience of who I am as an individual, as an entrepreneur. Because I had been, my only jobs to that point were with startups. So I had my first startup with Atom Software back in the dark ages when we had CD-ROMs and floppy disks. We went public. That was awesome.
Wow.
And but right after that, because we went public and we missed our number, culture changed, top came off, everybody's gone, and everybody it lost its fun.
Yeah.
So I left there and went to another startup that was privately owned, and we got acquired. So that was fun. It was after the acquisition that it was not so much fun.
Right.
Because we got acquired by a huge company. They'll remain nameless, but anybody who knows me knows who they are. Just not a fun company to work for at the time. But that's where I realized that I don't function well in a big, huge organization. I'm built to move the needle in a small organization. So when the organization needs an HR department, it's probably time for me to go.
Feel ya on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when I started CWNP with $250 and a bad idea.
Well, apparently it wasn't such a bad idea.
No, it was a terrible idea because we pivoted 5 times before we got to that. The first idea was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. So it happens.
But those are key learnings, right? Like maybe you didn't have the best idea at first, but after 5 pivots, it's okay to pivot, by the way.
Absolutely.
You were able to sell your company. Huge. We're all kind of striving for that in the startup world.
Yep.
So that's awesome. So pitch practice almost every Friday at Atlanta Tech Village. It's great. Kevin and the team there, solid people, solid organization. I love having a space and a part of the ATV community. Let's also talk about atlantatechblogs.com. For those of you who don't know, and you should know, Atlanta Tech Blogs is a wonderful resource for everything Atlanta technology. And as hard as it is to get press and exposure, especially as a startup still trying to find your way, again, you pouring back into the community, open up an avenue for reach for those startups. So talk about Atlanta Tech Blogs.
So Atlanta Tech Blogs also has a birthday coming up next month. It was at the same time that that Tavani launched the idea of switch yards.
Okay.
That same week is when I launched Tech Blogs.
Wow.
And totally coincidental. We didn't mean to do that. It just happened to be that way.
Hey, Michael. Like Tavani, Michael Tavani.
Oh, right.
Not
Tavani,
Michael,
what's
our
up?
producer, who's behind the camera.
So what I had done, I was coming off of the crash and burn that we just talked about from Deductimore, which I'd also pivoted, but then crashed and burned. So I said, you know what? I don't know where I want to be. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at every tech startup that I can find in Atlanta and see if I fit, where I fit in there. So I've just made a list of all their blogs, because the way you get to know a brand, a company, is to read their blog, especially a startup. So I made a list of everything I could come up with. And mainly I was sitting in ATV, so I just went around door to door. Who are you? Do you have a blog? And a lot of them didn't have a blog. And so that kind of, okay, what's going on here? Went down to ATDC, did the same thing, and just made a list and compiled their blogs and built a WordPress site that would pull in their blogs via RSS and allow me to republish them. And so it started with literally with nothing, and I was modeled after the Drudge Report,
Yes.
which Drudge doesn't have any content. All they do is produce other people or show other people's content. So that's what it was kind of modeled to look like. And so I just started publishing out to Twitter, to Facebook, to LinkedIn, and via email every day.
Yeah.
And so every time, probably the longest standing ones are really obvious. David Cummings and Sales Loft. They've been there and they blog constantly.
Right.
They're the most consistent ones you could find. So every time that they would blog, it would hit the RSS, and I would push it out to my social network and via email the next morning. And that grew from literally nothing. Now we have a very strong social following, mainly on Twitter, and it's become, I think, sorry, Hippopotamus, if this offends you, don't take offense. If you want to hear about startups, absolutely Hippopotamus is where to go.
Yeah.
If you want to hear from the startups, go to Atlanta Tech Blogs. So they sit side by side, because everybody wants to know who's coming, who's doing what, and you want to hear their story from somebody else's view. But if you want to track what the startups are actually doing, follow us. That's an easy way.
Okay.
And so now it's kind of flipped around to me promoting things to startups, entrepreneurs, and of course what I call community, like places like ATV and Switchyards and other places like that. If you want to get easy press, boom, here you go. So every time you blog, we publish it to social network 3, 4, 5 times over the next 7 days. And you can push a story anytime you want. You can add your new blog there. If you have a press release, a video, whatever you want to push out, push it out. Doesn't cost anything.
And at what point it was, as it comes in, it goes out in an organized fashion. Now I believe you switched to a more curated model. Is that?
Not so much.
Not so much. Okay.
No, it comes in and I do some editing. And there's some things that there's some types of content, and it's not bad content. It's just a different category. When a company wins awards, I generally shy away from those and don't push those. I want the content that the company's talking about to their audience, the problem they're solving, and who they are. Kind of explaining their why. That's the content that we mainly push out, and that's most of it. It's probably 95%. So I edit maybe 2 to 5 out of every 100 feeds that come through.
Okay. And what sort of feedback have you gotten as a result of birthing AtlantaTechBlogs.com?
Everything from people saying, I have no idea why you would waste your time on that, to thank you so much, this is so cool, I follow it, and that's where I get my information, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And from the startups that, like you said, if they have 2 Twitter followers and they want, it's not going to jumpstart you to 10,000, but if you want other people to see you, you have to promote yourself.
Yes.
And this is a simple, free, easy vehicle to do that.
It's awesome. It's really, really cool what you're doing. Let's talk about the Combine now. That's kind of the latest big deal in your life. So what is the Combine, and what are you doing with the Combine, and what does the Combine hope to do?
Good. So as I've mentioned before, I'm a startup guy. And so what the Combine is a startup that builds startups. So we're a startup. KP Reddy and Hans Utz founded the Combine. I believe it was actually founded back in 2014 or 2015. Didn't actually do anything until 2016. And that's when they launched. They landed some clientele, And what we do is we go into and partner with enterprises, big enterprises, that just by nature of what they do, they create byproducts, patents, IP, software to solve little problems internally. And we go in and we say, all right, what are all these assets, and can they solve problems externally? And most of the time they can. I say most of the time, that's probably not right. If they can, what we find is that enterprise is focused on something that they do. They don't know how to build software and market it. They don't know how to market a device. They don't know how to market an algorithm that does materials analysis. They have no idea. They're engineers and they do what they do, and usually in a service business. So we take those pieces of IP and spin them out into new companies. So we've created 5 new companies this year.
Wow.
Created and launched 5 new companies. And then the difference between people say, oh, so you're an incubator, you're an accelerator. We're not. We are actually running these companies.
Wow.
So I'm running marketing. I keep doing that. Sorry, Mike.
That's fine.
Hope that doesn't kill your ears. I'm doing marketing for 4 different companies right now, including the Combine. And so we're this kind of shared services organization that we apply our expertise, our network, our experience to making sure a startup has a much better chance of making it.
That's huge.
None of them are going to, they're not going to ever going to get 100% success, but if you can beat 9 out of 10 failing, you win.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So we're running the startups to give them a better chance to get started, and then we'll ultimately work ourselves out of a job when they do a Series A or whatever the exit might be. Which
is fine, because there are plenty more coming up in this amazing city that we live in. Can you disclose who those companies are?
Well, they're out there. If you go to thecombine.co, you'll see our portfolio. They are, the first one we launched was called Constru with a K, and that is software for structural engineers, architects, and contractors to collaborate and share their BIM data. If you know what BIM, BIM data is?
I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't know what that is.
If you're an engineer, if you're in the construction space, you know what BIM data is. Now you can collaborate your Tekla data with your ETABS data, with your Revit data, with your Grasshopper data. It's all in one place securely in the cloud.
What are all those types of data?
The data specs? No, it's the data that goes into the architectural and engineering drawings of a building.
Okay.
So it used to be, blueprints.
Right.
Huge blueprints. Now it's on a computer screen and it's 3D.
Okay.
So we help engineers share and collaborate with that data in the cloud, as opposed to keeping it isolated on a desktop or a local network.
That makes sense to me.
So that's one company.
Okay.
Next one is PZ Flex. That company, actually, the operations are out in Silicon Valley, and PZ Flex makes software that does finite element analysis. Do you know what FEA is?
I don't.
O for 2.
I need to go back to school.
So finite element analysis, basically at a simple level, if I do that, you and I can't tell what that did to that wood.
Right.
But the finite element analysis software can model exactly what the impact of that is on that material, whatever that material is. Usually it's some sort of steel or fabrication or something like that. So what happens when you push radio waves through that? So the big market that we're pushing in is MEMS and sensors for inside your phone. What happens when you ram lots of microwave energy through a piece of material?
Right.
What happens to it?
Well, that's fascinating on a whole nother level, because we're not quite sure what it's doing to our brains to have these phones this close to them all the time. Yeah, and we don't do it on people's brains, just the materials, to see what's going to happen to this type of material and when it's, and specifically if it's damaged. What happens when it's damaged? That's fascinating. It is pretty cool. It's way over my head. You know what? But we're getting there, right? Yep. Slowly but surely. So that's 2. Third one is, where do I want to go with this? That's, so we have 3 that are very, I'm going to say somewhat obscure companies. So Hummingbird Kinetics. Ooh. So if you've ever been up in the top of the Peachtree Plaza, do you know that it sways? Yes. I heard, and I don't know this, don't take me, this is not fact, that it sways like 33 feet, which is a little frightening. A little bit. So the higher you go up that, the more it sways. Right. Well, it's called a damper, a sway damper. And because when it sways so much, it disrupts the functionality of, like, for example, elevators. Right. So the technology that we are marketing is a new type of sway damper that is way cheaper and way easier to install in a building. Okay. Instead of, there's a building, I believe it's somewhere in the Far East, that's a 4-story pendulum, weighs 400 tons. What?
Yeah, and so it takes up the first floor stories of the building, so you can't use those stories. They're wasted. And it's huge, and it's obviously hard to deal with. Whereas we put pipes full of water in the walls.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it makes it so much easier, so much cheaper, et cetera. So that's one of these obscure technologies. Most people are like, what? Where does that even come from? What does that mean?
Right. Up
The
there.
fourth one is Vistamat. Did you know that our cars are overweight? Who knew, right? So the reason our cars are overweight, the example, the way my simple brain comprehends this, because I used to work construction when I was a teenager and a kid. If I don't know the actual math of how much material it's going to take, how much fastener it's going to take to make this 2x6 stay on this 2x6, I'm just going to put 10 nails in it.
Why
to
not?
make sure it sticks.
Solid.
So when the car manufacturers are building cars, they know mostly what materials are going to do, but it's not as accurate as it needs to be. So as they say, okay, here's what this material is going to do under certain impact, so we need to add to it to make sure it's safe. And they add to it, but it's not accurate.
Hence overweight cars.
Overweight cars, somewhere in the range of 5 to 20% overweight.
Wow.
So
that's
if you do that math, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we make the software does those calculations to a precise manner. So you can say, I don't need this thickness of steel or aluminum or whatever it is. I need this thickness of steel. Accurate. The cars can be 10 to 20% less weighty. They can weigh 10 to 20% less. Yeah. And then the last one that from that portfolio is a device that mounts against like the inside of a ship, mainly for military use, so that if you have if there's a blast nearby. Here's another thing. I don't know if you knew this. You're 0 for 2, so I'm going to see if you knew this. Which is more devastating to a ship? A direct hit by a torpedo, or a torpedo that explodes about 20 feet away?
I'm going to assess your nuances and say the one that is 20 feet away because it's the less obvious.
Crazy, and you're right. I don't know why that is. I don't know anything about that.
Can you tell me why?
But because it disrupts, it has more impact on the stability of the vessel, I guess.
Sounds like another one of your startups.
Exactly.
I see synchronicity there.
The device that's patented is this mount that goes on the inside of the vessel that protects from that blast.
Wow, that's amazing.
Go figure.
How did you find these companies?
How
did they find you?
That's our network. Starting with KP and Hans, they have a huge network, and one of KP's network, he comes from the construction, what we call the AEC world, architecture, engineering, and construction. And so he knows a lot of people in that world. And one of his contacts said, I think you should meet these people. And so they talked, and the client, again, it's out on our website, it's Thornton Tomasetti, huge engineering firm, global engineering firm. They build buildings that are over 100 stories, or they design that are over 100 stories tall. And in the nature of their business, they had to solve all these problems. You know, how do you keep a building from swaying? How do you get your engineers to talk to other engineers using other software to talk to the architect, talk to the contractor? How do we get all that data in one place? How do we figure out what a material is going to do when we bend it? All these problems had to be solved, and they were solved by engineers. But those products are not in the core business of what Thornton Tomasetti does, so they spin them out.
Wow.
And we create startups.
That is so awesome.
It's very cool.
So cool. So I'm assuming, again, but correct me if I'm wrong, you are just so excited to go to work every day and
I am,
and learn what you're learning. And
yeah, I love startups, and I love kind of the way my brain works is once things start to be the same for a period of time, I'm really bored.
Yeah,
and I kind of check out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I sold my first company. It wasn't because it hit some grand level of success. I was bored.
Huh.
I was really bored because we had hit our pace, and I got bored. So I never get bored.
Good.
Never get bored.
Good.
And with KP and Hans around, if you're bored, there's a problem. Big problem.
Well, that's great. So remind us again, we go to
thecombine.co.
thecombine.co. We will pop this up right here so you can see it. Speaking of, let's take a turn in our conversation. Let's go to a place. I believe you suggested a place.
Out in the woods.
Out in the woods, maybe Colorado. Yeah, so let's cast a scene of the woods in Colorado, and let's shift the conversation to a really cool event that happened in my life that you were a part of. I was at Church of the Apostles, and just going through the grind of my startup and like trying to decompress on Sunday and like spend some time with God, and came time from communion, and I walk up to dip the bread and the wine, and there's Kevin, he is holding the cup and the bread, and I'm like, wait a minute, there are Christians in technology?
You betcha.
What? That's crazy. But it's funny, in my 20s, I didn't talk about my faith. It was very separate. Like I went to work Monday through Friday, Saturday was play, and then Sunday was church.
Yep.
But now my faith and my career have overlapped so much, and I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed. It's who I am, and it's okay. And so it was just a really cool reminder to see that there are people doing major things in this city and around the world that do share your faith. Yep. And it's cool to be able to connect with somebody on a level that's just beyond work, right? There's a whole nother world out there of a human connection element, which is super important for supporting each other, especially in the world that we are in of startups. It is the highs of the highs and the lowest of the lows, and you've got to have that network. So, this is completely off the cuff. Didn't prepare you for this, so, all my bad, sorry. But if there is anything that you want to share with whoever might be watching out there, just about, your faith journey or how your faith and your career have either overlapped or not, just kind of anything you want to say, maybe any sort of learnings that have been imparted to you by other mentors or people, either inside or outside of the faith, that you want to share. Just, it's your platform.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long-winded answer coming. Get ready.
That was a long question, honestly. That was one of the longest questions I've ever asked.
It's interesting. This is kind of a second life for me. You have your college friends, and I still keep up with a group of college friends, but they knew me in college.
Right.
And I was not a believer in college. And I didn't become a believer until I was 26 years old when I met my wife. And after we got married, actually I didn't meet her. That's a whole nother story. Okay. My wife put a tack in my seat in the 6th grade. She was not my wife at the time. Now she is. Now we got that going. So after we got married, we both became believers. And so that was right about the time that I got my first job. And little did I know that my first boss was also a believer, going through his faith journey, trying to figure out where he was supposed to be, and we were able to share a lot of that. His boss, CEO of the company, also a believer. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what that meant. I was so new, and we're still friends to this day, and still share our faith to this day, and we've shared that walking through the ups and downs of startup land. And so I was able to grasp on to say, you know what? It's cool that there are people that I work with that we don't A, have to talk about work, and don't B, have to always go out and drink beer after work. There are other things that we have in common, and so a lot of those people I'm still friends with to this day. And then so that understanding of who you are in the workplace is still coming out today. The lessons that I learned back then when I became a believer. Are you familiar with Bill Gothard?
No.
You're younger than me. So I learned the basis for my faith was at a conference, a week-long conference downtown Atlanta, at what used to be the Omni. Now it's the not Staples Center. Now it's the Phillips Arena.
Phillips Arena.
And there was 10,000 of my closest friends there. And this guy named Bill Gothard stood up there and just walked us through a week of what it means to be a believer, and a week of instruction on, okay, here's your faith, here's how to apply it in life, really specifically.
That's like super intense.
It was very intense, and there's two things that came out of that. One is, it's not my money, it's God's money. And because at the time I was holding on to it, because I didn't have any. I was broke, completely broke, didn't have any money. And so I was holding on to it with a really tight fist. And he said, it's not yours, it's God's. So he's just letting you have it. And part of what he's asked you to do is to give something back. And so that began a journey of financial freedom for my wife and I. When we started giving, we realized, wow, we've got more to give.
Yeah.
And that's how God's economy works. When you give, he gives you more.
Mm-hmm.
That second thing was about work, because I was really lost in what I was supposed to be doing, my role, my place. He said, you have, and this came out just recently, again, in another conversation with a colleague. He said, your only job as an employee is to make your boss successful. That's your only job. Now that does not mean blowing sunshine. It does not mean feeding the ego. It means having the tough conversations that you know, I go back to biblical, the accounts of Nathan and David. When David really stepped off the rails and had the affair with Bathsheba and had her husband killed and she had a baby with him and then he married her, it took a Nathan to go up to the king of Israel at the time and say, you're a thief.
Yeah.
When if you stepped out against the king, they would take your head off.
Right.
But David listened because of the relationship they had. And that's our job as, if you have a boss, it's your job to make that boss successful. Mm-hmm. And so that was just the inflection point of, okay, how do I approach work every day? Who's my boss? What do I need to do today to make that person successful? And that has helped me in every step of the way. And then I found that I was the boss. So as you're the boss, what do you do to make yourself successful?
Wow.
That's a trick question.
Yeah, so it went from servant leadership to now you're the leader. Do you have any insights?
Servant leadership. You serve. First of all, you got to find the right people. Mm-hmm. You got to. So I know what I'm good at, and I know what I suck at. So I do the things that I do really well, and I try to stick to those. Every now and then, you got to go out. Like, you know, I ran my own QuickBooks for many years. Bad idea.
Yeah. Don't ever make me an accountant.
Yeah. So I had to do it. I couldn't afford to hire an accountant until I could, and that was great. But so things like selling and writing code and doing accounting times, you hire that, and you make sure you get the best people and you serve them.
Right.
So it was always, as the leader of that company for so many years, it was always my job to make sure that my employees had what they needed to do their job. Everything from here to here to here.
Right.
Everything they need. What do you need to do your job?
Yeah. And
And sometimes you have to say no, because they might say, I need $50,000. Ain't got it. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So that's been the way when it comes to work, that's where my faith is woven in there. Mm-hmm. There's so many biblical instructions for how can you be wise with money? How can you treat people, whether they work for you or you work for them, whatever that relationship needs to be. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying I do it perfectly, nowhere close.
How can any of us? We're human.
You can't, but you have a guideline.
Right.
And you know what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's helped me tremendously along the way.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So for anybody out there who's watching, you know, how can we as a community, both in real life and online, help you in your efforts, both personally and professionally? What can we do while we're watching today to help get you to the next level?
You know what? It's not about helping me. It's about you know, doing something. You know, like I created pitch practice on a whim because I needed help. Mm-hmm. So what do you need help with? Go out and do that. Yes, you need help with it, but go out and help somebody else with it. And that's what the whole, you know, when I camp at ATV, like I have been for the past 4 years, pay it forward. Yes. Give something. That's if you want to get involved in the startup community, or you know, maybe you're in a transition, which is a nice, fun way of saying I don't have a job. Step out and give some value, because you have something that somebody else doesn't have, that somebody else needs. Give that away, and you'll find value there. People will then value you because of who you are and what you do and your willingness to give. And then you know, if everybody should tell their story, everybody should blog, everybody should write. Yes. There's been a couple of people I know recently who've just turned it on really strong, like blogging every day. Wow, that's strong. But you get to know somebody's personal brand and their corporate brand by the stories they tell. Mm-hmm. And if they don't tell any stories, they're a closed book. So go out there and tell your story, whether it's on, you know, WordPress or Medium or whatever. Tell your story, especially if you have a startup. It's the easiest, fastest, most effective way to establish your brand and establish your voice and to pull in customers.
I love it. Kevin Sandlin, it is always a pleasure to spend time with you, get to talk to you. I'm so thankful to know you and just thank you. Thank you for your time and for sharing today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and when you ring, I'll come running.
Sounds good.